Hello and welcome to episode 138 of the Imperial Truth podcast. It's just me for the intro, so it's going to be a little bit quicker. Before we go anywhere, let's talk Element Games. Big bundles of 40k. Well, I suspect most of them have gone now, the 40k and Age of Sigmar bundles, although some of them are still around. If you do want to collect a new army, it's always worth having a look. I noticed that some of the GW stock came back in as well for a few items that were running out, so obviously Element will be getting their share of them. Lots of other Christmas stuff as well. I just ordered the Blood Bowl 2 rulebook and a few other little bits and pieces from them, and it was actually shipped out via Amazon shipping, so it was there on that next day. I don't know if this is something they're regularly going to do, but I'm not necessarily against it if it is. Maybe it's just with the Christmas break, because obviously there's some extended postage times at the moment with COVID and then Christmas coming as well. I think you can forgive a parcel arriving a day or two later than otherwise it would normally. But they'll be there. If you get any money for Christmas and all that, all your little hobby funds replenished, then you can head over to Element Games and spend that money. I've got a few plans, but I need to get some stuff painted first. Also, we have Geek Shield life insurance. It's not a nice thing to think about, but it is something that's important. And if you've got it, it's worth making sure you've got the right cover, so it actually achieves what you want it to. And if you haven't got it and you're considering it, then Pete can help you out with that as well. Pete's also got his own podcast, the Geek Shield podcast, where he does little bits of Heresy content, but other gaming content as well. But there's painting advice every show as well. So if that's your kind of bag, if that sounds interesting for you, then go and check that out. It's the Geek Shield podcast. Now, obviously, it's not that long since the last episode came out. Not much has happened in terms of Heresy. The one real bit of anything we've had is the Black Library Advent stories. There are only going to be 12 of them this Christmas. 6 40k, 3 Age of Sigmar, 3 Heresy. We've got The Serpent's Dance by Mike Brooks, which is an Amandera Kendall short story. So she's a Sister of Silence that we've read about, shall I say. You've got Brandon Easton with Embers of Extinction, a Perturabo short story, and that comes under the Primarchs heading. The Serpent's Dance comes under the Horus Heresy heading. And then we've got The Lightning Hall by Graham McNeil, but we don't have a cover for that yet. So it's going to be interesting to see what those are about. We might get a little bit more information on a couple of those. We've got, just after release, the Saturday after this releases, we have the Black Library preview, whatever they're calling it. Obviously, we haven't had a Weekender this year. Normally, they plan to reveal lots of stuff at the Weekender, so we're going to get elements of that, as well as some pre-release books, I suspect. Well, maybe they won't do it that way, but announcements of limited editions for sure. And they're going to have authors on as well. So if you are listening to this before December the 5th, I think it is, then you can head on over. You can find the details for it on Warcom as well, but you can watch that if you're that way inclined. Yeah, Mike over at Track of Words has put up a new blog post. Well, it's a few days old now from recording, but it's about the online preview. Basically, it's hopes and predictions based on what logic we can come up with, but also things that have been talked about and stuff like that. It's quite a nice little post there. He goes through 40k, Age of Sigmar, and 40k, but also touches on the other sections they have, which don't quite fit in those, so horror, crime, chronicles, necromunda, etc., etc. And he asked me to write my wishes, very much wishes, for the next year. Top kind of 3 hopes and wishes for Black Library releases to do with the Heresy. I think he got, who else did he get on? He got Kenny from the Combat Phase podcast come on and talk about Age of Sigmar. 40k, and he got, I'm trying to remember, Mortal Realms, one of the guys from the Mortal Realms, Aaron, that's who, to talk about that as well. So if you're interested, head on over to the Track of Words blog, and if you do like what Michael does, either through this show or through the blog, he now has a coffee account, so you can support him there if you so wish. So pretty lean on the ground in terms of Heresy content. I did start painting, if you're following any of the Instagrams and Facebooks and Twitters, did start painting more of my Ruinstorm demons. In part, I did this because I had the COVID. So I got a positive result. One of my work colleagues got it. I was very lucky in it was cough, cold symptoms, and I had an 8-day long headache. But if that's all if all I'm going to get from it, then I'll take that every time, to be fair. But it allowed me to sit down with some contrast paints and some immersion miniatures, big monsters. Haven't been able to do a lot since then, but I think the plan for 2021, the first event, I'm hoping that I'll be able to get enough of these demons done by then. I should be able to. I'm using a Crimson Fury list, and I've got 2 types of lesser demons. And I'm using Bloodletters for one of them, and the other one I'm using the Chaos Furies from Warcry, which I need to buy a second box of, actually. Haven't done that yet. But the big beasties take me a while. I'm not the quickest painter. There's a lot of wing and things like that on some of them. But it actually worked out fairly quickly for Fury, so I'm hoping the Bloodletters work on a similar kind of time scale, and actually I should be able to get them done in what for me would be a reasonable time. That kind of normal Christmas break period, I'm going to be away for 4 days of it, so I won't be doing any hobby, like Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day. But to be honest, I don't normally get to do much that period of time anyway, because we're usually busy with family. And then I do work half days between Christmas and New Year, but hopefully we can get some done then, and hopefully before then as well. I'm in a tier 2 area in the UK, which means I can go out a little bit more than some, but it's still not a huge amount, and it's still not mixing in households, things like that. So hopefully the distractions of some computer games and role-playing won't be too grand for me, and I can get a bit more done. But I will keep posting pictures of that on the various social medias. But I don't think I have a huge amount more to say. Obviously, this is the December episode, so our next episode will be January the 1st, 2021, or as close as I can possibly get, depending on what's going on. I am keen to try and make improvements to the show. Hopefully, Howard, I think, has been quite a good guest to get on, and maybe I will lean on him a little bit more. I think that's not a bad idea. I've got a few ideas bubbling, but please let me know. Please tell me what you would like to see, what you think we can do, because I can add that into the melting pot that I've got stirring at the moment. And we can try and work out what we're going to do into 2021, which is, it just sounds so hopeful. Into 2021. Of course, not a lot's going to change as we flip over the clock, but there are hopes and sights of a possible turning this around at some point, and hopefully next year we can get some more events going and a bit more travel and all that kind of stuff. And hopefully the show will go along with that. I've got a hope that GW will step up on the Heresy content as well next year. Maybe we need to organise a little bit of a push for getting a regular monthly Heresy content like we have with the Road to Thramas. Maybe we've got to ask for that a little bit more, let them know we want it. But anyway, I'm rambling, so let's take a break and get on with the show. Well, I'd like to welcome back Mr. Howard to the show. Hello, Howard.
Hello, Greg. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. You?
Yeah, not bad, thank
Excellent.
you. Not too bad at all.
But alongside him for the first time, Mr. Stu. How are you doing, Stu?
I'm good, Greg. Thanks for inviting me on.
That's quite all right. Thanks for coming on. So, Stu and Howard are mates, and you're part of the crew that we used to go to events with. That's how I met you, isn't it, Stu? One of the many events.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's almost how I got into Heresy, how this all began. We all met at a Heresy, one of the early Heresy weekenders, and it kind of expanded from there, quite expensively ultimately, but all good.
Successfully.
All good.
Let's go with successfully.
Successfully for Games Workshop. So let's get started there then. So we're going to look at, Howard, you spoke a little bit when you came on the show a few episodes ago. You did break down a little bit of how you got into Heresy. But so we'll start with Stu on that. But you guys are new-ish to the game itself. What was how much... So it was a few years ago that you went to that weekend, Stu. How long have you been interested in Heresy as a wider thing?
I think it goes back almost kind of all the way. I mean, I think I have the classic gamer origin story. I started back in Rogue Trader days playing Titanicus and Epic, and then took the obligatory break and came back into the hobby. On my return, it was primarily book orientated. I started to read all the Heresy books, followed that through, went to the first weekender, and from there, again, it's still very much in the book, reading about the background, learning the lore, really enjoying that. And it wasn't until this year, in fact, that we really started to get Heresy bugged quite badly. Or good, or in a positive way, and it really exploded, if you will, my interest in the gaming side, and from that, collecting, painting, it's opened so many other hobby avenues and hobby doors that it's now probably my primary system that
Cool.
I paint and play.
So were you playing other games before?
Yes, so when I came back into the hobby, Howard's laughing there because he knows all the systems I play.
I think, is it fair to say you play other games, Stu? I'm not really sure.
There's one or two. I always played. I think it goes back to nostalgia from your youth. I played Fantasy Battle when I was younger. I played a little bit Rogue Trader. I came back into the hobby, got back into 40k when there's vehicles now, fantastic. Let's have some of those, and then again joined some big clubs in the London area and started playing again some of the old fantasy games. And I think I'm very much a hobby butterfly. I'll play a game, I'll immerse myself in that game, and then something else will take my fancy, whether it's Legion or whether it's Armada or now it's Heresy, and kind of jump on that train, the Heresy train, and see where it takes me. But I do think Heresy now is I'm really enjoying the setting. I've always enjoyed the setting. I really enjoy playing games on Estevan, or hopefully in the future playing games on Prospero or Calth, and it's that narrative side which really excites me and interests me.
So that was your main driver to pick Heresy up. There wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So it reached critical mass. And you were like, I'm in there.
Probably a little bit more. I think back at the start of the year, obviously with the whole COVID situation and a pending house move, I had to make a decision on, as Howard is doing now, packing things up and having a good look at what I have and deciding will I play that or will I not. And one of my long-term goals was to build and play more of the Calth set and the Prospero box sets. They'd been sitting in a cupboard, as probably very similar to many listeners, sitting in a cupboard as a future project and never got round to it. So I thought, right, I'm going to build these guys, get them all painted up so I can play, at the very least, games of Betrayal at Calth or Prospero. And it's probably expanded from there. There's been quite a lot of influences. My gaming group, reading the Siege of Terror books. It's got me really interested again in the settings. Watching a number of excellent battle reports online. It's all heresy based. Following a number of painting tutorials, etc. as well, all on heresy. So kind of that all together has probably created critical mass for me. And now I'm really enjoying the setting. I didn't think I could have had as much fun purely in the Marine Force as I am compared to what I played in the past. But yeah, very enjoyable.
Okay, cool. Howard, for you as well, what got you to the point where it was you're going to do Heresy?
It's interesting actually hearing Stu say that, as I haven't really thought that through until this conversation. That actually it varies. It's actually quite different across there. Whereas obviously Stu and I have been friends for a long time now, and meeting at one of those early weekenders. Actually, our route into the game has actually been notably different. I mean, I had picked up those box sets as well that Stu mentions, and I was there. I was there the day that first Betrayal book came out, and even the first announcements with that Forge World made that they'd be doing that as a game. Before that, I hadn't played Heresy other than, as Stu says, the epic settings and similar to that. Even that didn't in any serious way look at Heresy. So picking up the first Black Book, totally besotted with it. Absolutely all in. Love it. Playing the games, not so much. It was building up a force with a view to playing a game, but didn't actually. There wasn't a scene in the. I was in London at the time, but I hadn't been following the scene or in the clubs as such then. So I was just sort of building along and mirroring what I was doing with 40k really. But didn't take it as a serious gaming thing. It was more a hobby project and immersing myself in the background as that came along. It definitely kicked up a gear this year. And there was a definite reinvigoration. You could sort of feel it coming. It was almost felt like there was a pressure building somehow that just needed to find that outlet. That say, actually, I'm going to collect this seriously now. This is now a foreground thought of I'd like to create some forces. One of the, I think I touched on it previously, was considering it actually you could build, rather than just continually adding to one collection, one force or otherwise, the idea of building up smaller, more defined, contained forces and armies that could be used, which addressed the number of points that it made. The idea of inviting friends over to play a game, to get them into the game or to enjoy games easier, because you could say, I have a ready, I'm fortunate enough to have a setup here ready to go. Actually, where finding the space to do that presents another problem, but at least you could say there are 2 armies here ready to go, small scale ones. Let's get into this. A couple of squads, even something quite small scale. That was quite appealing, and the idea of creating matched forces and similar kind of came out of that. So I say have a force of Iron Warriors and Imperial Fists, having those to face off against each other, do a little sort of short day-long narrative set of linked battles or something like that. That was really appealing, both as a hobby project and as a gaming experience, growing out of other games that and other types of gaming experiences that Stu and I had and others. That was appealing, and it kind of escalated from there, because that kind of met sort of coincidentally at the time where it was really kicking up a gear with, I mean, obviously it was more than this year, but with Siege of Terror really reinvigorating a passion for the setting. That it all came together, it all converged and led to a real focus on it now, and then discovering that it had reached a bit of a peak. Well, I don't know if it's a peak, but it reached there was a lot of material out there, and there's a lot of YouTube channels talking about things. There was a lot more content to consume, which helped stoke the fire. Sure.
So what was the kind of time scale that you guys kind of made that tip over? Are we talking just after pre-COVID or just after COVID?
For me, I think pre-COVID there's always been a plan to get into Heresy at some point. I had bought some World Eaters at one of the weekenders, and they sat in the box and unbuilt. I think I did also buy through one of the Facebook groups a World Eater Force as well, and that was to be the future project. With COVID coming, and I decided, right, I'll finally build the legions in the 2 boxes. I then decided, well, what else will I need? This is the fatal gamer question. Well, I have 2 squads of tactical marines. What else do I need to make it viable as a small force, then, well, I'll need a few tanks. Okay, well, what else do I need? And Howard went about that, I think, quite methodically, and we planned it from the lists. I, on the other hand, a bit more sporadically. If I saw a good deal, then that might form the basis of a force, and I'll build on that and expand it out. I think, for me, starting on those 2 box sets, building them up, getting paint on them, that was the starting point to where I am now. Having done that and having a sense of achievement, having painted the basic box set, that then, I guess, inspired me to go on and do other things. And as Howard said, there's quite a lot of resources online, some fantastic battle reports, which kept me sane during early parts of lockdown. Watching those, it's inspired me further. Watching a lot of YouTube videos and again, reading the books inspired me as well. I had all the black books from the various weekenders, and I had previously just used them as reading materials, lore, because they're such beautiful books. But now there's a real, I guess, desire to play the campaigns in those books. It's now become a long-term hobby goal to play the Esteban campaigns, to play the Calth and Prospero campaigns in particular.
Do you think that change, that emphasis of desiring to play in campaigns, do you think that was a new aspect to it? Do you think, Stu, this year?
I think I've always enjoyed the narrative probably more than the competitive. I think the narrative games that we played from 40k over that weekend were very enjoyable, even though they were very small games. They built up to a kind of to tell a story, and I think having all the great resources in the black books, it lends itself perfectly to having obviously to match forces, as you said, campaign games, and you play it to an ending, and then you feel, well, I've done book 1, now to book 2, and kind of a sense of achievement having always played the campaigns you've read about.
There was, and I agree, and I think there's a couple of those games where we were just, I think most recently we were fortunate to be able to play a game. What are we talking now? 3-4 months ago, it was where lockdown was easing. Over the summer, we were able to play a series of linked games, which was largely about learning the rules, about actually how does this game play. As we both played the game before, we both read it all, but had we played enough games? No. Was it familiar to us? No. So let's refamiliarize ourselves with this specific game, so we don't get this sort of cross-pollination almost of thinking, I'm applying a 40k rule here and I'm applying a Necromunda rule here or something like that. Let's play through some 30k games. We did that in a series. They're starting out with a couple of tactical squads. It was barely even that. I think it might have been a squad each or something like that, and a character. We played those through, escalating into a more substantial game over the course of a day, really trying to work out the game, not just how does an assault phase work, how does this work, how does that work. In that, there were some moments which I think on still now. I mean, you think of the combat that took place between our two captains, effectively, the 2 consoles that we had. It was phenomenal. Yoda finally get the charge in. I'm playing Emperor's Children. I get them in against his World Eater, and you think, this is fantastic. The guy's going to come in. He's going to get the initiative bonus. He's going to come in with his precision strike. He's going to just go through this guy, no trouble. 2, I think it was a 5 and a 6. Oh, this is a dream. It's instant death. It's going to happen. What does Stu roll? 2 5s. Rolls it on his refractor field. There were screams. I mean, you think it was a hell of a moment, and you think, yeah, those sorts of things where you just get the roll of that totally drew us in there. Just from 1 or 2 moments with relatively small forces, which was largely about a learning game. Suddenly captured all of those moments that you're reading about, either in the black books or the black library books or the audios or whatever it might be.
Okay, Stu, do you read the limited edition Siege of Terra novels?
I do, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to hazard a guess here. Saturnine came out in March, limited edition. Did that have an effect? Because what you're talking about in narrative can be achieved through 40k or Age of Sigmar or a myriad of other games. And Games Workshop have released over the last couple of years some narrative packs for 40k particularly, if we're thinking of stuff like that, which, are intended, whether they do it or not, are intended to kind of get the similar results that you guys are talking about. Do you think Saturnine had an effect?
Undoubtedly. I think one of the things with the Siege of Terra novels, everything's ramped up to 11 in terms of the battles, the characters. All the characters are there. Without giving any spoilers away, the underground battle in Saturnine is phenomenal and it's inspiring to build a Zomataris boat, which I think we are in the middle of doing now. One of the where Heresy wins out over, say, 40k. I have a 40k force as well. It's just a bit more mothballed at the moment. Is the weight of the books, the weight of the setting, 50, 60 novels plus all the short stories, all that history, all the characters, all the events and the battles. It's got so much weight of material that it's just so rich to delve into. And 40k has that as well, but it's newer, and I think for me, the Heresy just tells such a great tale. It's the classic War in Heaven tale, and you can go into a lot of detail, but to be able to play the start of it in the Esteban campaign, as Howard and I did, and we gave, throughout playing that game, we started to give backstory to some of the characters. I think the Sergeant, who I think the consul in the first game, he survived, and his brother came to avenge the loss in the second game, and then rolled terribly badly, and I killed him as well. So it's all a bit about the drama and telling a good story.
Cool. Yeah, I think because I've definitely had people message me. I said this last show, message me saying they've just read Saturnine and they're getting back into the Heresy. I do think the quality of that book, but also the stature of that book has done great positives for what we're doing. To counter my own thing about 40k, I do think you were talking there about your small forces. And 40k has such a grand scope. Like, yes, the Crusade and the Heresy is a grand scope fight, but 40k covers X amount of different species, doing galaxy wide. Like the Horus Heresy, although it's galaxy wide, the main thrust of it is a set number of pivotal battles, really, isn't it? So the focus, if you wanted to skip a load of the books in the Heresy, you kind of can in that respect. So you are focusing down a little bit more. And I think the nature of particularly having 18 legions, but making those 18 legions fundamentally different is, if you compare what 40k do with their Space Marines versus what Heresy do with their Space Marines, it's just that level of 40k is that overview thing, whereas 30k goes a little bit deeper. There's those layers in there.
I was just thinking one of the appeals actually is this sense of, and this is what kind of caught me with it somewhat, because actually the period of reinvigoration, if you like, also went hand in hand with me throwing in far more with Adeptus Titanicus. That had a similar thing, and that was leading me to read more into very specific bits of background, which I hadn't previously. I had a working knowledge, but nothing to the depth necessary, and somehow it's a perception I have, and I'm not 100% certain where this would come from specifically, but they feel like, for want of a better word, crunchier settings. It's something about it. There's something about 30k, the setting, the game, and the other games around it, like Titanicus, somehow feel. I mean, they tend to attract a higher. I mean, this is true of Titanicus, so there's a great deal of love is lavished on those models. You tend to see people who want a modelling challenge are taking on Titanicus and Heresy-based projects when they are painted extremely well, particularly as a force. I've noticed when you see people building an army you're not building it for tournament play. They're not building it to just, I'm just going to smash these out as simply and easily as possible. Obviously, there's the full range on all games.
Yeah.
It's just you tend to see less of that and more of the labours of love.
The focus is different, isn't it?
Yes.
Even the majority noise we get from 40k is tournament focused. So when you look online, you see tournaments before you see other things. There are, as you say, there are people out there doing amazing 40k stuff. There's hobby wise. There's people out there doing amazing. You name the game system. There's people out there doing amazing stuff. but the internet noise we get is tournament based, which isn't focused on that. Whereas it's the other way around with Heresy. Right? Yes, there are people out there who just want to play the game. Some of those people still, I can think of, say, Will Henry, who's an extremely good player, but he gets someone else to do his armies for him because he wants really good looking armies. He doesn't enjoy it, so he goes and gets them painted for him and painted well as well.
I can understand that. I absolutely understand that. I'm looking at it, and I seriously considered it with the Titanicus models. Yeah. I've loved the hobby from a very early age and continuously through. I love the activate. I'm sat here surrounded by paint racks at the moment. I love that experience, but there are times where I think I'm now seeing things that are possible. I'm exposed to seeing the quality that some artists can bring these models to. I would like that. I don't have the time to invest, and I mean here dedicated learning time necessary to get to that stage. I therefore would almost be tempted to have someone commission someone to paint this, treat it almost like an artwork, and I would like to own that piece in that way, be it as a small force or otherwise. And that becomes particularly something one might consider when you're thinking, I'm just going to have a maniple in Titanicus, for example, or a small legionary force in Heresy. I can entirely see that, because you want to have something and do it to a high level, do it justice to a high level. I can entirely see that motivation.
Yeah, I think carry on, Stu.
I agree, Howard. I think what in my painting hobby journey, I've always predominantly done things myself, but with time pressures being what they are, you start to come to realization, well, I'd actually quite like to play this. What do I need to do? Like, good God, that's a sea of grey plastic. And then you can get disheartened by that. But also there are a lot of resources out there where you can buy a core of a force, and if that is painted in a certain way that you can then add to, or you can then replicate, depending on how good that is. That's a good starting point, and that can get someone from zero to a few steps up the ladder, to get them started quicker. Kind of look into how people start building forces. But certainly, I've bought a few signature pieces online which have been painted very well, and that almost inspires me to try and replicate it. But also, it's a good centre point.
I think that's an interesting point. I mean, the market for which the entry point is an interesting discussion, and beyond that, actually beyond an entry point, there's a much larger discussion regarding a starter set or otherwise, or and how one gets into that. But beyond that, kind of slightly obvious point, there's so many people playing the game now and have played the game for years, and I'm not just talking 30k, I'm talking everything kind of Warhammer related, really, that there is a vast market out there, whatever route you choose, eBay, a Facebook group or otherwise, of secondhand stuff, and some even being made to be sold. You could pick up very economically and very easily, because there is almost a suitable supply of pre-made models, which cuts down amount of time, either pre-made or pre-painted or both, obviously, that you could kickstart your force. You could even buy this force ready to go. And so if you're all about the gaming, that would be a way of doing it, or it maybe just gets you started. And you could, particularly if you ask the person who you're getting it from, to say, what's the paint recipe on this, so you could replicate and add to that force. I think that sort of bootstrap solution, one that just gets you to a certain point very rapidly, is quite an interesting way in. I mean, that surprised me when we started looking around at the beginning of the year, when you suddenly realise there's an abundance of supply of second-hand things that suddenly make it, you sort of think, oh, buy a painted. If you bought and built and then had commission painted a force, that could be very expensive to do that, but you obviously get the complete custom choice, totally suited to you, and it's a piece of almost unique artwork, and you pay accordingly. Whereas if you take a slightly different approach and go, well, actually, I just want to have some models that someone else has decided they're never going to use, or otherwise I just want to pick up. I don't care too much about what particular direction they're pointing their bolter, or they don't care that too much. Great, then you can easily pick up a bargain or otherwise, and you've suddenly saved yourself a time. Which is, if you're not doing that, if your hobby is not the act of building or the act of painting, you can shortcut that very economically, which I was surprised at.
Yeah, I'll tell you what now. Any vehicle of any size, I always try and buy them already built, because I just don't like building them. Some of them are hard work. I'm not that great at it, to be honest. I'm a bit heavy-handed at times. So my Spartan was purchased for I think it was 25 quid cheaper than you can buy. Not my Spartan, my Mastodon was purchased 25 quid cheaper than you can buy it, and it was all built and it's painted really well as a Red Scorpions one. I need to repaint it. I feel guilty for that, but it's also got LEDs in it.
Wow.
So in some ways, I kind of, if I see another one come up for a similar price that's unpainted, I almost want to buy that and then sell this one because it's done so well. But but
it's true. I mean, that speaks volumes, though, doesn't it? A built and painted to a high standard, and it's built to a high standard to the point where it's been customized with a lighting kit. And you bought it cheaper than it would be to buy the bare model.
Yeah, and you
haven't had to wash the resin. You haven't had to reshape it with hot water. You haven't had to remove the mold lines and the flash and the gates. You haven't had to sand it. You haven't had to glue it. You haven't had to, the list is endless. And you got it cheaper than had you bought it new. I mean, this is where it suddenly you think, okay, there's actually other routes to this.
Yeah,
I've heard various podcasts and things talk about Frugal Hammer and similar. I mean, in 40k, I'd argue it's even easier because there's so much more
scope
exactly. Here, the aspect of treating it like a historical war game comes into play, about how stringently one follows that.
It's also resin.
That's down to personal choice.
Yeah, and resin at the moment, Forge are struggling to keep up with demand due to the restrictions they've got in place. So stuff selling at retail, and that's fair enough. But yeah, there's lots of things you can do in that respect around that. As you say, go Stu.
So, I think your Mastodon example is a great one. I think on the online groups, it's widely known as one of the harder models to put together, and much better to try and get that pre-assembled than trying to do it yourself. And I think Fire Raptor is probably another one. It's a bit notorious, but certainly a good majority of the tanks I have are second hand, and having someone else build it, all the things Howard said, spray paint it black and sell it to me cheaper, that's a winner. And then I can then spray it afterwards. So.
Yeah, the one thing is to make sure it's built well. So that Mastodon, I asked for extra pictures because the last thing you want is big gaps in it or what have you. But any decent person will be happy to show you that they've done well on it. If he refused to show me pictures, I wouldn't have bought it. I'd have been suspicious. But that's just one little kind of thing to be aware of with vehicles.
And I would that's a very good point, and I would echo that. I would rather than someone be sort of enthused and go, that's it, fantastic, I'm going to buy everything now. Treat it sensibly and treat it cautiously to go through, perhaps work your way up and things, because you are buying second hand. You do need to do your due diligence. You need to do your checks. I got carried away and bought some Javelin speeders, quite a few of them, on eBay. They came. I didn't look closely enough because I got, again, carried away with the thrill almost of getting them, and didn't look closely enough at the photos, and they actually quite clearly showed there was some damage to some of the trim.
Right.
Came to an understanding of that, but that's the nature of buying online. I've done that for years. Well, not buying online, buying second hand online.
Yes.
Apply all the same rules you would to anything. These are high value items. This is not chump change you're throwing around. I mean, there's investments being made. You need to take it seriously and actually absolutely be sure in yourself that you're going to be happy with it. And you need to have the right attitude in the first place. Like you say, I found myself, I bought a bunch of models that, a bunch of Assault Marines, for example, that were painted when they arrived. They were painted very heavily. It was a bunch of heavy support squads as well. It took me so long to strip them, to paint strip them. And even then, I was finding that quite a chore. I've refined that process dramatically now, but I thought, actually, I am clearly so fussy about this that I've wanted to get a quality finish. I should never have bought this secondhand. If I'm going to be that fussy, I need to stump up and pay the time and the money to go and buy them either new or hold out for something that's not painted. These were painted heavily. Well, okay, that's fine if you're prepared to put in either the considerable amount of work, in which case, what's the saving?
Yeah.
So yeah, you got to really ask yourself quite a few questions before doing it. But what surprised me is that there are far more options out there than you might otherwise assume.
And again, someone's time is like, they might have more time than money, and some people have more money than time. So you just got to find where your value lies in that respect.
It's very true, and I think I've had good and bad experiences buying small forces online. As Howard said, people should treat these things as the valuable items that they are when they're packed. I had a force arrive with lots of things broken. Managed to come to understanding with the chap selling, but it was a lot of work to then repair that. Yeah. Whereas the Emperor's Children, it's the force I got, that inspired me then to go and replicate that colour scheme, and that was a very good basis for the rest of the force that I've since sprayed and copied myself. So it can work both ways, but it is a very good resource to start to get you up to a good level of force.
That's a really interesting point I hadn't considered before. Would you have said, Stu, that you would have tackled some of the recent painting techniques and skills had you not have gone into Heresy and more specifically been trying to match the paint scheme of some models that you happen to have bought in a second-hand group?
Probably absolutely not. I think I having certainly being forced to try and copy some of those techniques has undoubtedly pushed my painting, my airbrush skills in particular, to places they've never been. And airbrush skills was zero beforehand, and that's now at least got up to level 1. But without having had the inspiration of trying to replicate and make the force cohesive, I would never have probably gone to that level before. And now I'm learning about the clear spray, whether it's red or purple. Learning a little bit more about the airbrush, more techniques. Probably my next step up is weathering, and that's a massive subject in its own right as well. So yeah, undoubtedly, without the encouragement to copy what I have purchased, I would never have gone there.
Cool. Before we go too deep onto that, so anyone who's listened to Howard before, he's a little bit like me in that we want everything, don't we, Howard?
I couldn't possibly comment.
And
Greg,
I would say I have some self-control, having brought Howard home from a few events.
I'm allowed to reference that. It was still one of my favourite memories. Yes.
My wife will say that Howard has no self-control when it comes to buying models.
Treat yourself.
Indeed.
These events, they're special events, Greg.
Absolutely.
I do vividly remember. I will forever be grateful of Greg very kindly dropping me off on his way back from one of the events, and as he handed me one of the lovely Forge World bags of models. And very kindly saying, thanks, as my wife walked in, very kindly saying, thanks for looking after these models for me, Howard. I will forever be grateful without any prompting. Okay.
Yeah. So, and being in a position to do so, and I've collected for a long time, haven't painted that long, but I've collected for a long time, and I can sit and just as Heresy trading comes up, I can see something I think I know I'm going to want that. I can go and buy that now. Stu, are you an impulse buy, or did you have a plan of what you kind of wanted before going in?
Probably a bit of both, actually. I think certainly I'm very, very easily influenced by friends, by materials. If I watch a film or read a book, I want to go and recreate that, whether it's ancient Rome, Heresy, or something else. I think, I might go and buy a starter force of that, and again, fortunately in the position I can do so. Impulse buy versus planned. I think Emperor's Children was an impulse buy, which I've now really enjoyed having done that and then built upon that myself. I think Thousand Suns were a partial plan, partial impulse buy, because was building a Wolves force. I wanted to do the matched Thousand Suns force as well. In the same way that Howard mentioned, having matched forces, for me it's to have people over. For me it's to have the matched forces to play the campaigns. A bit of both.
You bring that up with Howard there, and actually, a slight misrepresentation on Howard there. When you talked about having multiple armies, did you plan out those other armies, like the ones to lend to your friends? Did you have an idea of, I just want 1,000 points, whatever it is? It
came about through Titanicus. That was where the idea sort of started out. Where I realised I'd picked up a few models because I was a big fan and was planning to do. For example, when I first started, I mean, we're talking at the age of about 12 here, so it's 25 years ago. Are you thinking, okay, I like these guys on the front cover of this box, Blood Angels, and then that just went on forevermore. And you keep adding to a collection, and you think, okay, a new unit has come out, great, I want to add that to my existing army so that I can always pick from the full range of units. That has been my way for years on those sorts of things, regardless of game system or otherwise. That changed relatively recently, where I was looking at a large part, I was thinking, I was having to almost trying to commit to which faction am I going to paint my own. If so, what color scheme am I going to go for? There was almost a stress involved in thinking which one am I going to commit to. And I suddenly thought, actually, there's a whole different way of doing this, inspired by the excellent articles on Goonhammer, which set out a starter force, a 1,500 point starter force in the case of Titanicus. So I thought, well, actually, why not just establish a couple of set forces that are perhaps typical or take advantage of or work to the advantages of a particular faction, become typical of if you like, of that faction, paint those, do those as closed forces, have an opposing force to that, and then that's going to be fantastic. It suits. We live in London. Stu and I live in London. Our group of immediate friends also live in London. You can transport things around. People aren't typically running a car, and even if you do, it's not necessarily the most practical solution to actually meet up in that way. So you're likely to be taking bags of things. It has a slightly different consideration in terms of how you're transporting things. The idea of saying to someone, just bring yourself and maybe the rule book, is quite a significant deal if they're coming over to play some games. So the idea of having those pre-assembled forces ticks both a kind of an organizational point of view, meant why choose when you can have both in the case of the factions, but it meant you expanded your range of kind of hobby options and gave you these kind of ready set forces, but largely inspired to some degree by these the box sets that Stu's talking about, Betrayal at Calth and Prospero, similarly. So you have these preset forces. I then thought, well, actually, that same principle can apply here. I had been hoarding, effectively, a set of Marines to commit to either to both Blood Angels and Sons of Horus. And I thought, well, actually, this same thing applies. I remember sat in one of the weekenders hearing John French talk about his writing of the Crimson Fist. And as he was speaking about it, I was picking up the Forge World catalogue. I will be going to the lobby and purchasing some breaches because I have to now. This is so inspiring, so it's getting me so fired up. I really want to model this, play this game. That it's quite evocative. Suddenly thought, well, actually, I can extend that now and have these again using some predefined. Isn't it? So someone might look at that and say, "Oh, it's net listing." It's not quite. It's certainly not how I looked at it. It was just a way of establishing. I mean, I could have written those lists as someone else could, whatever, it doesn't really matter. You have a defined force to work to. It was just a way of bringing some limitations or some control to a collection and then determining forces. Otherwise, it's almost, you've got this sort of endless set of choices, which could be overwhelming otherwise.
Yeah, fair enough. So, yeah, there is definitely an appeal there for certain personality types, but then also for people who've got budgets, things like that, to have a plan.
Absolutely.
And a classic way of doing that is the kind of slow grow, 500 points, kind of build up your army. And I think it's it's often the amount of times I see people talking about that, they're already in a game system and it's their second or third army. It's a great way just to start your first army. Maybe it involves a bit of research to make sure you're not, you're kind of doing the right things for how you want your army to end up played. But there are places to go and find out that information. As you say, we're all in maybe slightly different position in that respect. But it's cool. There's no wrong way to do things if it works for you. I think that's
true,
important.
and I think there's more exploration of those different routes or otherwise. And there's something. I'm sort of thinking here about an experience I had. It was during a period where perhaps 40k in particular was waning a bit. I mean, we're talking several years ago. What are we? Probably 6-7 years ago now. There was a point where 40k was waning a bit. Games Workshop themselves had a bit of some interesting direction choices that they were making. I was looking at other game systems and otherwise. I'd never played a card game previously, and I picked up the then game Netrunner, and it was fascinating going through an experience of picking up a game at the same time as someone else. There were friends of ours, very good friends of ours, who were very knowledgeable about that game and had played it for some time. They introduced us, but to have someone else who was at a similar level, who was starting out at the same time, and they were building up a collection of, in that case, cards to play. The game was Netrunner, and they were learning the rules. They were learning the tricks. They weren't. It's very different when you're coming down, and even with the most generous person in the world, in terms of who's giving their time to teach you the rules, you still feel. And again, this comes down to certain personality types. I don't know, but there's a certain sense of this isn't quite the same as if there's two of you. I mean, I've already referenced it, Stu and I playing a game, both learning the rules, both at a similar sort of level. That could have been shortened by playing a game against someone who absolutely knew it inside and out and said, yeah, well, of course you wouldn't move that unit like that because that's going to lead to this. That's a very different experience. There's something quite appealing to learning the game around people, and then we are fortunate, I think. I mean, we're living in London is ideal because there's such a large number of people. You are likely to find someone who's going to be a similar thing. But I would encourage anyone to reach out using the many channels that we have these days and look at that, even if it's a case of now in the conditions we all find ourselves, almost collecting a force without leading to immediate games.
Yeah. There is nothing quite like playing people who are truly on the same level as you and discovering the good and bad things that can happen in a game all of your own, or discovering your opponent doing something that you think, oh, actually, yeah, that's really good. Those kind of moments are, you don't get them very often because you don't have, as you say, not often do you have, as adults, I think, do you have those interactions. Like when you're a kid and you and your mate are just getting into something, you tend to get into things together, don't you, when you're younger? As adults, you tend to find people who are already into something, or it happens that way anyway, generally. So models is fine. As I say, you're both kind of deep into Games Workshop, been to Weekenders, so you always knew about the lore and the models. Heresy Gaming, it's a different beast. What were your real struggles getting into playing the game? Right from the start, was it knowing where to look for what you needed to build your army, those kind of things? I
immediately wondered about what extra was out there. Like you say, it's being knowledgeable and having had a continuous knowledge of Games Workshop. I knew where to go to get the sources of. Oh, okay, I know a red book is the case of the most up to date army lists and similar, and I either had those or would have known where to get them. Where I found interest, I had been aware of, perhaps not completely aware of. I've been aware of some of the third party and fan made elements to that, and I was very keen to see which of those were current. I mean, I'd heard things like the Centurion game mode, if you like, and that appealed to me, given my emphasis on trying to build initially say, smaller forces to be able to play smaller games that we could play in an evening. That was quite appealing. So that was my immediate challenge, was to say, okay, which of these projects is current? Where do I go to find out? Which are the current sources? Where is most of the community gravitating, for example? Where are the community hubs? Which are the popular sources of material, and why are they popular? That sort of thing. That I found was the most interesting. I think it's fair to say it would have been relatively straightforward to find, okay, here's the rule book, here's an army list, and I can go from that. Difficult to have that view to have a view on that when you have been familiar and continuously familiar. What are your thoughts, Stu?
Yeah, I think similar for me in terms of the actual game. I mean, I've played 7th edition 40k, probably more than I've played 8th, for example. I've not even played 9th yet. But I think the thing that's really helped me and also inspired me a lot was watching, say, the 30k channel battle reports, watching the dice rolls, watching how the rules work, watching how it works with the different armies and the units. And apart from just inspire me to go and get some of those units or to keep on with my modelling, it really helped teach me a lot more of how the game worked. And the appeal of, I think, Heresy compared to 40k is it's much more, I'd say, dramatic. You can one-shot a tank. You can blow things up. It could be very hugely cataclysmic in terms of the battle. You got 20 Marines, you're wiped out in a turn, and it seems much more epic. I put epic's a better word, more epic a game system rather than you just lose a hit point, or you've just one-shotted the tank and killed everybody around it. That's very, very much appeals.
So would you say that things like the 30k channel, so you've got an understanding of the rules, and maybe it did help with a few more little bits and pieces, but what you got an understanding more of was kind of the way that armies are portrayed, or the feel of the game and the armies?
Probably a bit both, because watching one of the best parts, it's very well put together, and credit to David who does it. I think one of the best parts is that players talk about their army selection at the beginning, and they say, okay, I've got these 10 guys, sergeant's got artificer armor, they've got this upgrade, and you can start to understand why it's been given in that way. And then you watch how the sergeant tanks all the wounds on his 2+ save, and you think, well, that's definitely must be put in my list. And you can watch why they've selected the units the way they have, and then you see them played out and you see the strengths and weaknesses. That helps me with my decision on what to buy next or what to build next, and what I need for that force in terms of, okay, clearly that needs the rhino, these guys are on foot, depending on what role they have. And I think it helps me build my force selection as well as understand the rules and the inspiring part.
I would agree with that, and I think that sounds. I mean, certainly I would look at an army list, and again, this is being someone who's familiar with Games Workshop games for many years. I'd still look at an army list and go, well, it all looks quite good, and there might be something I'm unaware of that makes this thing that on paper looks perhaps not as good, but actually maybe it's amazing because it's got some synergy with something else. Therefore, I find it quite hard to make those decisions into an initial list. I was absolutely clamoring for finding someone who'd already written a set of forces or lists that I could work towards, so that I knew I could both have something that was enjoyable to model and paint, but also something I could take to a game and enjoy or prepare for a game otherwise. I agree with you completely. I think battle reports are a fantastic way, particularly the condensed ones that just play them out. I think that is quite a commitment in time, but ones that are condensed to certain points and also discuss why the forces are what they are. I found that quite compelling, particularly as you could have that on while you're doing something else. Personally, I was almost looking for lists first, and then came to battle reports, rather than the other way around. That was just the way I was looking for it, or even people just discussing the factions. I mean, for example, I was looking for lists that were extremely, ideally, very typical of a particular force that played up to the particular trait that they were known for. I wanted that. I wanted it to be representative of that. If I've got Iron Warriors, I'd like them to be a siege force, please. Now, I think that then opens, and I think it was something I heard on this very podcast, was there's a very interesting discussion then about, okay, that's the starting point. I can then choose to deviate from that at a later time, which I thought was an interesting idea, the idea of which legions lend themselves to other play styles or other list styles, or perhaps don't, and give it in a really surprising way. Here's this fast hit and run force of Imperial Fists. Okay, that's not what one would expect of that force, but actually it's a completely viable way. It's one of the strengths of the system that I think you can get away with doing that, but that's something perhaps isn't the natural place to go in your first outing.
Cool. So that's quite interesting. So, my familiarity with the system for however long it's been, I think it's fair to say that when I view the lists on 30k channel, my approach is different than yours was when you first came to it, because I very much was, as I watch it, I'm like, yeah, cool, you got one of them. Yeah, cool, you got one of them. Because I already understand then how that's going to work. So that's quite an interesting one. That if you're newer to the game, you're actually taking from that. And it's just not something I thought about, which is good. It's cool. It's great to see the other sides of that. That description can inform more than I necessarily would give it credit for. I like that. When you talked about Community Hub, so obviously we've got 30k channel, they've got their own website, but they're also on YouTube. We got other places, people on YouTube and Goonhammer or all these places. How easy was it to find the places where you fit into a community, and how was it joining those? And where do you go for your Heresy content?
For me, I think obviously we started our own little community up. We brought in a third person and into our Heresy gaming group. We have a wider sort of group in London, and the three of us are planning games. We've not played huge amounts with the wider community because of the timing, because of the COVID, obviously. That being said, the London Wargaming Guild in central London, I've been going there for a number of years playing other systems, and they've got a Heresy group, and I've now joined that WhatsApp group, and it's like all WhatsApp group, it's huge amount of content and comments and helps keep me fired up from a Heresy point of view, and as in terms of both painting inspiration, lists, games, etc. So it's quite a vibrant group. I think obviously there's quite a few YouTube channels as well talking about Heresy lore, Heresy games. There's Mini Wargaming as well as a resource. The old battle reports from there, I watch some of them as well. So there's quite a lot of online content, and hopefully we're quite blessed where we are in the London area. There's quite a lot of Heresy gamers and a lot of locations where we can play. So we're in a good spot.
I certainly agree. I mean, we've reflected before on being it's somewhat of it feels like it's a golden age for all things hobby related, really, all things gaming. There is a vast amount of material to choose from, almost to the point where you think, well, where do you start? I found, as you said, for things you can dip into and purely consume, YouTube and podcasts were excellent for that. To some, I would actually add into that Instagram as well. Great way of finding inspiration. As I found the inspiration coming from hobby projects was one of the biggest drivers for me. Seeing these incredible character models being converted, just forces being converted and painted, and you think, yeah, absolutely, I would like to have something that is approaching that at the very least, if I possibly can. Those which are purely consuming, then you start to sort of feel a bit further and see which are things which are sources of community where I might engage with. In my case, that came through Facebook primarily to some degree. I was sort of hopeful while we were still attending the Wargaming Guild here in London. There was usually something approaching a Heresy game going on there. and you'd see them playing around here, Dark Sphere in London as well. They tended to have Heresy events there as well occasionally. You'd see those, and that would be fascinating to see the forces that were there. So you could find them, certainly. They were out there. And there was enough of a choice that I think you could find be it a channel on YouTube or a podcast that resonated with you, their particular style. That we're fortunate that there are a range of styles that you get to pick.
Yeah, cool. It sounds like you're in a position there where you have local communities, and that particularly for Stu talking about a WhatsApp group there. I struggle with a lot of WhatsApp groups for the amount of messages that get thrown around. Does that mean you maybe don't dive into the Discords and the various Facebook groups quite as much?
I'm probably on a couple of the Facebook groups, so certainly
Sure.
some of the Match Legion ones, so Empress Children and World Eaters, and the Thousand Suns, again for mainly painting inspiration, but also I would say the Instagram is fantastic for that. I'm not so much of a forum person. I know
Sure.
they're there, but it's time is a limiting factor. Yep. If I'm lucky, I have half an hour to an hour in the evenings, possibly to do personal things, and sometimes that could be hobby, sometimes it has to be chores. But time is certainly a limiting factor. So I'll probably be able to dip into something, watch something, or listen to something, and then stop and go and do something else. It's attractive.
I've not come across any Discord servers that have called me. I've got those for a few other things. There's a Necromunda one in particular that I tend to follow along with, but the Heresy specific ones, there's not ones I've come across. Facebook groups, definitely. They're the same as Stu said. Faction specific ones I found very interesting. Heresy Trading was a fantastic one as well. A dangerous one, a fantastic one. Brilliant community. I would hasten to add. Actually, I'd say it was true of all of Heresy. I've generally found it, and I know there's been some discussion of that within that very community. I personally think it's excellent, particularly compared to some others that you tend to see. Forums, yeah, Bolter and Chainsword. I was there. I still frequent that so much, but that tends to be quite broad in what it's covering. Heresy specific. Yeah, Bolter and Chainsword actually was one of those. That way, again, you're engaging with that. You might put something out, they might put some questions out there, and people were very happy to help with that. I find some of the range of painting advice, though, are ways of shortcutting that and even experimenting. You can say, well, actually, some people have done a vast amount of experimenting already, and here they are being kind enough to share their particular painting technique or otherwise. I mean, that I found very good in terms of what the community was offering. And I found podcasts were a different thing because they tended to cover contemporary news or contemporary issues. And I was slightly wary of diving into a back catalogue. And I got over this. I got chased to it. But I was slightly wary of diving into a back catalogue and thinking, I'll be picking up habits or news or information that's somehow out of date. When actually that isn't strictly true. Actually, a lot of it is applicable anyway. So, but podcasts weren't one of the first places I went to.
Oh, that's cool. I do think, not everyone is lucky enough to have a local group or two or venue or whatever, and therefore those alternative online venues become much more important to them. And that's all these things are thoroughly dependent on a whole number of different issues as well. Or even if there are local groups, some people just don't want to be kind of out there in these groups and would prefer the anonymity of being online, doing it that way, which is, it's all cool, just as long as you've got access to some cool heresy content and people. That's all that matters, really. So, we've gone through you getting into the game, kind of like where you go, like how we've looked at your armies. Stu, you talked about picking up your painting based on sometimes having to match models you're already painting. How have you found, and talking about trying different things as well, how have you found your painting side of thing inside the Heresy going, and where have you gone to get help for that?
Yeah, sure. I think I was probably an okay painter with a brush before, nothing like fantastic, but probably enough for tabletop. But with the Heresy and the specifically with the vehicles and the effect that I wanted to get, and the effect, for instance, I wanted to replicate, I needed to go the airbrush route. Now, I bought one of these things about almost 2 years ago now, and after an initial bout of enthusiasm trying to master it, gave up and said, right, this is far too difficult. I'm unclogging the damn thing every 10 minutes. Put it back in its box, and that's where it stayed for quite some time. But then getting into Heresy, and also coupled with the start of the lockdown, I thought, right, I'm going to learn how to use this damn thing, because I have to get the effect I want. I have to learn the airbrush, and it's been a learning curve, but I'm now up enough of that curve for it to be what I wanted it to be, which is a tool to get the effect that I want. And I'm now, having watched many YouTube videos, taken lots of tips, getting to where I'm happy with it, at least to do its job. I'll never replicate any of, say, Lil Legend stuff, and unfortunately, although I'm a subscriber, very inspiring, the airbrush now got me to a stage where I can happily put silver, then put a clear coat on top, and it looks good, and I can do my pre-shading of tanks, etc. And I'm learning a lot of new techniques, all inspired by having started a Heresy army, which I definitely wouldn't have done otherwise. So it's certainly taken me up that learning curve, and I'm quite happy where I've ended up.
Cool. Howard, you got anything to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of almost thinking about what almost trying to think what next with those. Once you've got those. Now, the problem is these projects, and you've used the term project several times, Stu, and I find that quite interesting. I was just viewing them as a dedicated project. I'm now moving to a point where I will try and consider these projects as much smaller endeavors. I will kind of ring fence them and say, no, that I cannot. I may have all these models planned out, these grand armies planned, but I'm only going to work on X number at this time, because I know full well that I'm going to be distracted off into another project. I tend to play a whole range. I mean, I'm particularly fascinated with the specialist games range. I'm increasingly tempted to go and look at Battlefleet Heresy, for example, and the idea of linked games and much sort of more grand scope type campaigns, where first of all you have to land troops on a planet, and then you're going to play a large scale game. Even the idea of what was epic scale, and revisiting that, or sort of mixing Titanicus with an epic scale force, and playing more different scales of the game, is hugely appealing. Some of the best games I've had over many years of playing war games have been that kind of multi-scale interaction. These are quite grand plans. I'd love to be able to do that. When that's going to happen, I don't know. So trying to keep a focus on individual things and take enjoyment out of that, and be reminded that is a very enjoyable thing to do, is quite important. Like Stu, I mean, I pushed myself to try out new skills almost with each project, and taking on, I mean, airbrush was one of those, and taking that further and start using some of the techniques that you see and recommendations that people talk about. And, for example, using varnish to seal layers, add weathering and transfers, and this, you're suddenly elevating models, and we're very fortunate to be able to have that kind of range of options in front of us. Heresy is particularly enjoyable for that. I mean, we said it before, there's sort of a historical aspect to it. I'm agonizing at the moment over what particular shade of red I'm going to paint my Blangers. That is a discussion over, because I'm going to have some in 40k, I'm going to have some in 30k. Do I want to be able to use those forces interchangeably as I would have done once, or actually am I going to have a very specific 30k force and a very specific 40k force, which is probably where I'm leaning now. We have so many options. It's almost going with your instinct about which ones you want to do. Because if you're not passionate about it, I think, why are you doing it? It's a hobby after all. It's supposed to be enjoyable.
Yeah.
It's supposed to take enjoyment out of it.
I think that's a great point. I think it has to be a passion project, and as I said before, I think I take inspiration from a book or film or something, or a setting, and I get I see a shiny object. It's a new game system. It's a battle I want to recreate. Passion goes into that. It takes me quite far along the journey. But I think your point on making sure your goals are achievable is a very good point, because you can become overwhelmed by either the choice of what to build, or having amassed a sea of grey plastic. How do you paint the damn things? And then it can be disheartening. I think I've learned that the hobby should be fun. It should be there to relax you. It helps you de-stress. It certainly helps me. And having set goals, and I'll just finish that unit. I'll finish that little force. And that's the way I'm probably going now, to making sure I actually achieve some goals rather than it being too open-ended.
We had a very interesting discussion, and I think this is relevant to this. As Stuart and I have had a discussion about this before, about if you are in any job, it's particularly true. I think anything, whether it's something that you need to de-stress from, and I think that's perhaps brought into more focus this year than any other. If you are experiencing those stresses or otherwise, having something that is completely all-consuming. Now that might be, I've had this discussion with colleagues at work where their passion perhaps is climbing, for example, or a sport of any variety, but it has to be something that can be completely consumes their mind entirely. The ability for it to do that, and I think the wargaming hobby in general is extremely good for that, because no matter what your particular interest is at a time, or particular fancy is, it can consume you. You could go and read. You could read a background book. You could read a fiction book. You could read you could go and paint. You could model. You could be thinking and planning your force. Whatever particular aspect it is, there's going to be something there, and it can be all-consuming. Like you say, painting is a particular one for me in that case, and actually the model making itself, and I can go, right, I'm going to go and learn with this. It completely consumes you away from there, and that has paid huge dividends for your work life, or your every aspect of your life in particular. I found that to be a huge benefit.
What I'm pleased with is both of you have talked about projects that you've got where you want to do something. I think that can be a case where people feel compelled that they have to hobby a certain way because it's the heresy, whether inadvertently or through direct pressure. I've been told whilst gaming on a table that I must oil wash my tanks before. And it wasn't meant in a nasty way, but I sat there. I was like, it's not happening. I like what I've done, but there's sometimes is felt a pressure that there is only a certain way to play in the heresy, to paint for the heresy. Whereas particularly you, Stu, they're talking about you have an idea of what you want to achieve, and then you try to achieve that. I think that is it's something that needs to be reiterated, that if you're making a heresy force, at the end of the day it's your force. Obviously if you're going to paint bright pink custodes, might have to work hard to make that fit within theme, but your models don't have to be weathered to an inch of their life. My Mechanicum always got talked about by people walking around tables because they were about the only army in an event that wasn't weathered to an inch of its life, and they stood out. Those kind of things. Those norms that some people see aren't necessarily true. So people who are coming newer in don't need to feel that pressure. And the great thing is you can paint an army and then you can go back and, particularly weathering. I think that's a big one. You can go back and do that afterwards once you've painted.
I think it's a great point, Greg. I think ultimately it's your force. You've got to be happy with it. If painting and modelling is a sliding scale, you don't have to get up to an 8 or 9 before you can put something on the table. You can get to whatever level you want, as long as you are personally happy with it. And I think Heresy in particular, there's such good inspiration out there that people, you can try all sorts of different combinations. You could have freshly stamped Titans, or you could have ones which have been fighting a mud battle for months. Whatever view or image in your head that you want to achieve, that's your force. You can do it to that level, whatever level that may be. I mean, basics.
I'll also say I was talking to a prominent painter who will remain unnamed, and we were talking about weathering because I said I might actually weather my next army, and he pointed out that in Heresy a lot of the time the Heresy community get talked about the quality of painting across the board, and he's like, I do think there's a lot of average armies that are weathered and it makes them look better. Or makes them look, a better paint job than it is. And I kind of agree with him, actually. A multitude of sins can be hid with weathering, and that's part of the appeal for some people.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It doesn't mean that you can't have a 10 out of 10 army that's weathered. That's not what I'm saying afterwards. But again, I've seen people who are intimidated by what they perceive to be people beyond their talent producing stuff. And I think we need to be aware that, the last thing we want to do is put people off in that respect either. So, it's one of those things I've often said it's hard to define kind of when you talk about events like, what is effort and what is well painted and what are all these things that we talk about. Usually what you can do is usually good enough. It's fine. If I can, trust me, I'm a very average painter. I one thing I do is pick colours well. Right, that's what I've learned, and that's something you can actually. That's another thing. You can make up for lack of talent in other ways. I've seen people who can paint really well who don't pick colours very well. It can happen, but the simple thing of learning, and sometimes it's learning and it's trial and error sometimes. I've always found with some armies I end up thinking, what colour scheme am I going to do? I start looking through sports jerseys. Because, if you've got...
That's a great shout. I've seen that, had that thought as well. I was doing that with some Titanicus Legions.
It's like, what colour... Well, my Titan Legions are painted in Norwich City's colours, yellow and green. Because they work well. They work so well together.
Yeah.
And it's not something you would necessarily think about unless, some people will go deep into colour theory. You don't even have to do that. I don't really look at colour theory. I have the most basic understanding of it from just seeing what works. So I couldn't...
Yeah, entirely. And I think that's an entirely... I could have a much larger discussion about theory of design and colour here, but let's not do that. Let's not bore everyone to death with that. But I completely agree. There is absolutely nothing wrong with taking inspiration from something, because the very act of you doing it, or do whatever you do with it, whether you build it, have it paint it yourself, whatever, it will be different.
Yes.
You will have your own spin on it, one way or another. Using something like that in some way is absolutely fine, and I think everyone should just be encouraged to do that. Basically, the more people doing it, the better. I think there are going to be, then, because we're also in that fortunate period where there's going to be enough events and enough going on that you can choose. If you want to go to one that is truly historically accurate, or whatever that, future historically accurate, then crack on. Do that. That's great. There's going to be an event out there. There's going to be like-minded people out there. It's easier to find those people now than ever before. That's great, and hopefully you can get to that event. Obviously, there's challenges in that, but you're more likely to be able to do that than ever before. I would hope that if you're turning up at a club, for example, or you're playing a game with someone else, that anyone who's actually had a go at painting, modelling, etc., will understand the effort that's involved. So you can't go wrong, really. Just do it. Just go for it. If you're doing it, someone else is going to appreciate. That takes some time to do it. No one, in theory, should be looking at it with scorn, unless there was a completely different basis for which the whole thing was put together.
I think that's a very good point. I think anybody who's done it themselves will know the effort it takes to build a cohesive force, and to whatever theme. It's a lot of planning, a lot of painting, a lot of modelling to get to that stage. And I've fortunately never experienced any kind of negativity in any of the clubs I've been to, and that's a credit to all the clubs that I attend. Everybody's very supportive, and I think the Heresy community, as much as I've experienced it so far, online or in person, has been excellent, very welcoming, and long may that continue.
So before we wrap up, because we've been talking a while, have you hit any issues over the last year? Have you hit any points where you're like, I don't understand this, or I tried to do this, didn't work, or this makes no sense? Have there any been stumbling blocks?
I think for me, I'll jump in first. You can become overwhelmed with obviously trying to do multiple projects, trying to do matched legions, maybe slightly ambitious at times. But I think my counter to that is keep it simple. Try and concentrate on a unit or one or two units. Get those done, and then continue on with the rest. Don't try and do all your bases at once. That was a mistake. Or try and do spray paint all the tactical means at the same time, because you just become overwhelmed. Break it down into manageable chunks and reward yourself when you've done it.
Yeah, I think that's a good. The overwhelming nature of it is there's 18 legions, and that's before we start talking about the other factions, of which there are plenty. Then there are sub-factions within those. There are different themes within those. That can appear overwhelming in terms of, and I'm perhaps coming from someone who would look at it and go, I'd like to do all of it, please. This all looks incredible. But then you've got, as where I've made that point about instinct, you almost want to be able to choose those things and say, okay, this is the one this is the theme I'm instinctively drawn to, or otherwise there's something about this, I can't necessarily put my finger on it, but that's the thing that's going to keep me coming back to this, and go with it. Go with those sort of ambitions, I think. But try and not go too far with it and go, that's it, I'm going to plan this out, I'm going to buy a vast amount, have it all sat there and have this phenomenal force in the end. Okay, do it a piece at a time, because that will influence the future decisions. Inevitably, it absolutely will. Try and do it piece at a time, I think, is probably more realistic for a larger proportion of people. I think there are benefits to trying looking at, say, a larger force or otherwise. You get a sort of color consistency if you're doing some modeling that way, or sharing parts and things across there. But I think that's outweighed by some of the other benefits. There is so much material out there. I mean, as opposed to something like, 40k is the most obvious direct comparison, but actually I'd say it's true of a lot of these games. They either have a new edition coming out, or there's refreshes coming out. It's reinvigorated in some way. Heresy hasn't had to go through that in recent times, really, and so it's not say, okay, we're going to rebalance every faction or something like that, or we're going to do this. There's a body of units that are available to every single legion, plus extras. That is knowing which of those. Hence my seeking of lists in as a starting point. I found that to be a good way in, and avoided the only real stumbling block. I mean, I can't think of any others. Some of the rules, I would say, are, again, you don't have to be aware of every single rule across the board to enjoy the game. I mean, I was thinking of our sort of learning weekend that we had, Stu, where we were playing those games. What did we come across? I didn't find any of the particular. The game system was straightforward. I mean, in some of those looked like, oh my goodness, what's this phase going to be like? I know that there have been efforts to simplify the way a particular phase works, for example, is as 40k goes off into new editions. I didn't find playing those games, any of those, particularly challenging. Did you? No,
I think it's a good point. I think that the fact that the rules are set is actually quite an attractive thing for me. When we walked through that, in particular, we broke down the salt phase, we broke down that, and then we understood it, and then it was very good grounding for us for later on that weekend. I think having that stability, knowing, and as we learn the armies, as we learn the units, and with a lot of those units being available to many factions, you have that knowledge. Well, I know exactly how plasma gunners work. I know how what Sakaran does, and all factions can have those. So you're learning that body of knowledge to understand the game, and it's not, as you said, refreshed every 3 months each time a codex comes out, which isn't great. I think it's one of the attractions of the Heresy game is the static rule set, and kind of that's offset by you might have 18 legions, but you can have a huge variation in the forces you field from them, because you can be traitor or loyalist. They can, as you say, have different play styles. They could be a fast attack or an armored force. There's lots of different play styles within each legion, so your choice is very large as to what you want to do, which I think's excellent.
I'm hopeful as well that we're going to see going forward. We're going to see more. I mean, I found the Road to Thramas was a very good series. I would hope, given the direction that we've seen in other games and specialist games in particular, if they're still referred to as specialist games, I'm hopeful that there will be support for Heresy going forward that will make the entry that much easier, and we'll see even more gamers taking it up.
Oh, well, yeah. The $1 million question. We can keep talking, we can keep asking, but who knows? Who knows? I just on with regards to the rules there, I would say as well, if you're unsure, reach out to someone. There are places you can go. Generally, if you ask in the right way on forums or groups or Twitter or wherever, then you will generally get the right answers. If you have a podcast you listen to like this one or someone else, I think most people would reply, or even just sometimes a prominent member of the community, someone you feel comfortable asking, feel free to do it, because generally people are good. So you will get assistance. It's and it's down to our community as well to encourage new people. So we also should take on board that and be willing to help out where we can. You're right, the legions share a lot of stuff. There are armies that work differently, Mechanicum particularly. Lots of different rules. Everything's all slightly different with Mechanicum, so it can be a little bit more confusing. But, as I say, there's lots of information out there. You can go and find it. Well, okay, so that's kind of your two kind of experiences of the last 7-8 months or whatever we've had. If anyone wants to follow up with any questions, maybe we can get you guys back on if we get a few together to go through that.
Be delighted. That would be great.
Happy to.
I would turning that slightly on its head somewhat, Greg. Where do you see yourself going in the Heresy? I mean, you've had this for a period of time. What are your projects? What are you thinking about doing?
Same projects I've had forever. Space Wolves, Demons, Custodes. Yeah, just the painting backlog's huge. I'm slow. I don't paint while I podcast. That's the big thing. Couldn't do it. So, I wish I could, but I can't do it. So I've got I don't know how many points of Space Wolves that need to be painted, and well over 3,000 points of Demons that need to be painted, and a load more Custodes that need to be built and painted, and a load more Sisters to buy as well. On top of that, I want to do we got Blood and Glory hopefully going to be on next year, so need to start organising that. There's another event I want to do, but I'm not even considering it till I know we can put it on. And it might not happen because it's a little bit unique and will need a lot of work.
Is it events that are the thing that excites you the most about the Heresy in general, or is much like you put to us? Is it Saturnine, or perhaps the Siege that has fired that up, or even the new Black Book? What? Anything in particular that's caught your attention?
So it's been a year since I've been to Warhammer World, which was my last event, which was Blood and Glory over a year. I want to go and hang around with gamers again. Right, that's the big thing.
Absolutely.
I am just waiting. I'm waiting for the news that Adepticon's cancelled this year for next year, because I'm 99% sure it will be. So that'll be, March. I haven't been to America. I've been to America once a year for the last X amount of years, before COVID hit. Lots of friends over at Adepticon I won't have seen for, if I go again, it'll be 3 years. It's hanging out, whether we're playing Heresy and what it's meeting mates and all that stuff. Don't get me wrong. Absolutely want to see Book 5 of the Siege come out. I've just finished Luther. That was quite good. I want to see what they're going to do next with that. Want GW to start some article, just even hinting, longest ranges hints of what's in Book 10, hoping that it will still be Dark Mechanicum, etc. But just some official Book 10s being worked on would be nice to see. All those things. Ideally, we get 2021. We get a starter set. we get a starter set. We get
seeing what that did to Titanicus. That would be a dream if that managed to kick in. You'd sort of think there's a precedent for that, and one hopes that they're working away. It's just the lead-in times are obviously considerable with all those sorts of things. But I agree with you completely about events, particularly just the hanging out aspect of events. The weekenders. Someone shared a photo, probably because it was November, but someone shared an image of one of the late night scenes you might typically see at a weekender. I think it was this week or last week. And my goodness, did that remind me of how much I miss those. So I cannot wait for those events to take place again. And not necessarily from a gaming point of view or otherwise. It's more a complete immersion point of view. The ability to be completely immersed in it and enjoy that, and maybe the occasional... Stu and I have a tendency to go fairly hard at those weekends, but
I haven't even mentioned this to Stuart or anyone else yet. But I did mention to you and to Michael at one point, over this summer when this was all blown over in the summer, back in the very early days. I want to send the missus out for a weekend and have a load of guys over at the house and just have a weekend of playing games and chilling out.
Absolutely,
sounds fantastic.
As soon as this is over. As soon as we can have something where we can meet up, I just want to go and meet up with people somewhere, somewhen. I drive to Warhammer World on a day's notice if I have to, because it's. I've been in this hobby since I was 11, and I've only got stronger and stronger and stronger in it. Almost all my really good friends have come through the hobby. And it's fine. We talk online, and a lot of those people I talk to online because they're in America anyway. But it doesn't. It's starting to really get me down. Not in an overly dramatic way, but you start to think, hold on, when am I going to get to do this? I want to do this, and partly it's the not knowing. It's if you told me June the 1st we would definitely be able to meet up, I'd be able to look forward to something. And it wouldn't be as hard, but it's the having no date.
And I think that's a perfectly normal and entirely accurate representation of what I suspect most people are feeling at one point or another. For me, I was thinking, this is all very stoic. I can get through all of this. This isn't going to be too much of a problem. And yet recently you start thinking, the novelty's worn off now. This is proving a little bit more challenging than it was previously. And I agree with you, that unknown. But it will come back. I cannot wait for that first one. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that suddenly everyone just drops everything and runs to Warhammer World? It's going to be mental. Or runs to the Belfry or something.
Yeah, this too shall pass. We will get there, and you never know. We could get there with a brand new starter set, a second edition rules.
Oh my god!
And Book 10 round the corner. How perfect would that
stop
be?
Everything. They're releasing a new edition confirmed. Stop everything. What are we doing?
What are we done?
Absolutely confirmed. There will be a second edition someday. But, that would be perfect. But just as long as we can get gaming again, that's what matters.
And hanging out again.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Running events, even that. Even sitting down having to put up with people ask you for the 15th time, what time's the next break? We'll put up with it. It's cool. Even my missus. So we had we set up the photos, and we got a smart TV, and we got a little photo album when it goes onto standby mode. And one of the photos is me and the missus from Blood and Glory last year, and it might have been the year before. I can't remember. And the missus is like, I missed that. And she comes along and just works. That's all she does. She works and listens to Joe Freeman talk rubbish. But she enjoys it. So. Yeah, we'll get there. Right, I'll let you go, guys. I've taken up plenty of your time.
Thank you very much, Greg. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
We'll speak to you again soon.
Take care, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks so
Bye-bye.
much.
What's a Geek Shield? Is it like a Breacher Shield?
Not exactly. Geek Shield is an insurance service giving you hobby rewards along the way. We appreciate that life insurance is a bore, so we wanted to make things a little more exciting with rewards that matter to you. Cool, right?
Okay, so why life insurance? I have feel no pain. Isn't that enough?
Very different thing. Life insurance can be used to settle off your mortgage, help with raising your children, or cover your funeral costs. It's never going to save you, but it will save your loved ones from financial disaster. Here's what some of our customers have to say.
Pete really will give his all to try and find a better policy for cheaper and give you vouchers. Why would you not do it?
It's great to know I have security for my family. Of that, I am certain.
Thanks to Geek Shield, my wife now questions if I'm still worth more alive.
Thanks to Geek Shield, I get to murder my family in the name of the dark gods and get all the money.
Yeah. So head over to geekshield.co.uk to book your free consultation today. Terms and conditions apply. Geek Shield is not a physical shield, nor will it save you from the Primordial Annihilator.
Well, joining me once again, we have the soft, sultry tones of Mr. Myles. How you doing?
Hiya!
Indeed, that is the pure Welsh coming out there.
I thought you were just going to end our sentence with soft then.
Just,
So we have the soft guy, Myles.
I didn't think it needed saying. So,
Yeah, I mean, 2020 has increased my paunch, certainly.
well,
It's a very doughy year.
we ended up going back to Slimming World for that one, so I know the feeling. It was an early summer of weight gain. But
Oh
hey,
God, yeah. I mean, I'm ahead, and we're heading into Christmas as well. So my plan is, like a star, to expand, and then hopefully my body will just collapse in on itself.
or you might just split into two Mileses and increase the output of Little Legend Studios.
Oh, I would freaking love. I mean, we've recently got a puppy. I really need a second me.
Yeah. I saw your post. I was like, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Kittens was bad enough. Like a puppy's just.
Oh, I had a puppy before when I was a kid. Like, yeah, it was nice. I don't remember it being that much work, but I was like 12, 13. I just had the good bits of the puppy.
Yeah.
Now I'm on the receiving end of this little creature.
Yes.
He tried eating a Galvo back the other day.
Well, that's the thing. You need to lock that door, mate.
Yeah, I had to stop recording because he's going to chew through Zardu Layak and the Blade Slaves.
Oh, so he's got good taste. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, funnily enough, he won't touch Sons of Horus.
Oh, well. Yeah. Strange. It's all good. So we've got you on because, as you said, we're approaching that Christmas period. And once again, Little Legend is doing its thing.
Yeah, so every year I tell myself not again. I just can't do this to myself. But every year I squirrel away and I put together an advent calendar. So this is via the Patreon. So for the past 3 years we've been running, we've had a giveaway every single day via the Patreon. A little treat, be it tutorials, giveaways, PDF ebooks online, free classes, just sprinkled out like candy. My hope is the feeling at the end. So on the 25th, you will receive a exclusive video. I want you to feel like I am your tangerine at the bottom of your stocking.
There we go. What a promise that is. And, this episode should be out on the 1st of December as well. So,
oh, phenomenal. Okay, so the 1st of December, if you are signed up as a patron to Little Legend Studio, every single patron gets a sticker. It's something that I've wanted to do for a couple of years. I've wanted to send out Christmas cards to all my patrons. I've decided to finally bite the bullet and go through that sort of hell. Yeah, I've printed up these really gorgeous holographic stickers. So send me an email, send me a message, either via Patreon or via lillegendstudio@gmail.com, and I will send you one of those little stickers. And Greg, you're definitely getting one. You're getting a Mark 1. So I had to test a few prints out. They're slightly bigger than I intended. You get the Mark 1, the Thunder Warrior of the sticker.
I'm sure the missus will be delighted.
She's helping me. She doesn't know it yet, but she's helping me.
I'll put it on her car. It's all good.
Yeah. So as well this year, I've decided to get some artwork printed up for it. So 1st of December, have a look at the Lil Legend Studio Patreon, and you should be able to. Everybody can see this, even if you sign up or not. You'll be able to see this custom artwork that we've had designed with a kind of like grim, dark advent calendar that's very, very, very reminiscent of the old Rogue Trader artwork. So we have, what do we have here? Like a cyborg Santa. We have, on my insistence, a blood angel in there. A navigator who's looking very, very jolly. So we've really tried to push all the cliches we possibly could with this advent calendar. And like I say, every day there'll be some manner of tutorial giveaway. What we have planned for this, so we do have a Sons of Horus, just to give you like a sprinkling of the kind of tutorials you'll be able to see. Sons of Horus Dreadnought on custom base. We'll be reviewing the Lehman Russ sculpt, where I've taken one of the Primarchs, re-sculpted him with beard, which I know you're delighted with. Yeah.
It's cool. People can hobby wrong if they want.
Yeah. People. I'm going to put beards in it. One thing I won't be doing, I'll put my foot down on this, is giving Dawn a handlebar moustache.
Oh, thank God for that. That is, yeah. There's a line.
Yeah, I feel like I can. Our relationship could just about survive Russ with a beard.
Well, Russ can carry any look. That's fine, But
man bun.
Yeah. I mean, Russ could carry it. I mean, it's not great, but it'll be fine. If anyone can, Russ can. So it's all good.
Dawn with a handlebar moustache. I don't think I'd hear from you again.
It's just too Reddit for me. It just
yeah. Same.
It encompasses all those memes that are wrong with the heresy community.
Yeah, like armless Abaddon.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all those jokes that have never been funny.
Yeah, they kind of fall flat if you've read a book. Yeah, I'm right there with you. So PDFs, tutorials, giveaways. We have rather generously been given by our sponsors a wet palette to give away by Redgrass Games. We have a brush set to give away. We also have some of their custom holders. Airbrushes.com have also very kindly furnished us with 5 paint sets to give away to people. So all of this will be handed out during the course of the 25-day period. And of course, at the end, Christmas Day, you're getting a full custom special one-off tutorial. And I'm not going to say what that is. And as another little bonus, thanking the Imperial Truth for letting me on here and advertise my wares and just being an all-round top bloke. If you sign up, send me a message, send me Imperial Truth via the PMs, and I'll send you an exclusive Color Theory PDF tutorial that was only released during the year as an exclusive monthly release. So make sure that you get in touch, Imperial Truth, type that through to me. I'll send you through that custom PDF just for your listeners.
That's cool. Yeah, weirdly, Myles won't know this, but we just finished talking to Howard and Stu, and Color Theory is something we brought up, and how I was speaking about me specifically, how I don't really have an in-depth knowledge of colour theory, but I think I have a good grasp of knowing what colours will work on a model. Mm-hmm. And that elevates my basic painting that extra bit.
It so does. Colour choice. It's one of the things I encourage my students, that a grey, for example, Space Wolf fan, perfect. What is the perfect grey for your Space Wolves? Well, having an understanding, even a basic understanding of colour theory, will make you able to make much more confident and just better decisions during the painting process. So grey, for example, such a boring colour if you just use black and white.
Yeah.
If you add turquoise into the mix, you'll end up with something more of like a baby blue Arctic appearance. If you add a dark green into the mix, you end up with a more deep sea green kind of look. And on top of that, to further complicate things, we can contrast warm and cold hues. So we can use cool colors in the grey, so blues, greens, purples, and then we can contrast that with warm colors in the highlights of the grey, so typically yellows and bones. So this color theory booklet, which is an introduction to color theory because this is such a massive, comprehensive subject, I need to produce a few of these, will be sent through to you. And it also gives you a little introduction into the Martian color wheel, which of all the color wheels is my favorite.
Brilliant. That's cool. Yeah, it's just one of those little, say, color theory. Like you can learn techniques and you can learn, how to use your airbrush or how to use your brushes, and all those little things. But actually, there's some basic stuff you can do without having a brush or airbrush in hand that improve how your models look. And they are, sometimes they involve a little bit of reading up or whatever, but they're not difficult, are they?
Oh, God, no. So black, one of my favorite tips to give new students is use black and white to highlight the black, then use a turquoise glaze over the top, and it enriches the armor so much. So those little color decisions, I think that's what separates very, very good painters from like top class painters, their color choice. You see in lots of artists. I was talking with Andy Wardle a few years ago, and he was saying some of the feedback he got from painters that he was using too much white in his work.
Right. And
that confused the hell out of me. Like, what do you mean too much white? And it's only now it's starting to twig that you can use cool and warm hues to contrast one another. So when you're building up, a skin tone, for example, you don't have to use white in the mixture. Instead, you can use a very, very pale or a high value, so values that scale from black to white, a very high value bone color.
Yeah.
So it knocks away any chalkiness that may appear in those top highlights, as well as adding more depth to the overall work. So yeah, just little tweaks like that to your work can just yield such a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's something I say. You can do whatever level of painter you are.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's the decision when you have black armor or when you have yellow armor. What glaze should I use in the shadows? For the yellow armor, do I go with a Reichsland flesh shade, which is rather straightforward? That's just a darker amber color, or should I use violet in the shadows?
Yeah.
Or then you start thinking about complementary colors because yellow is the opposite on the color wheel to purple. Yeah, all these sort of little hints and tips. It's an introduction is given via that PDF tutorial.
Excellent stuff. Well, thank you for that. So as you say, you've done these for 3 years now.
Yeah,
it's a lot of content to put out in a month.
Yeah, every single day, every single goddamn day, and if you sign up this December, you don't only get access for this 1 month, you get access to the previous 3 years as well. And you get access to every tutorial that wasn't a monthly exclusive release. So you get things like the Lion, complete video tutorial and PDF support. You get Sanguinius, both a full video series and PDF support. There's a Lion tutorial on there as well, full 4K. There'll be an Abaddon tutorial up there, how to paint Blood Angels, how to paint Sons of Horus, how to do microchipping, how to paint a bust in 1 hour using nothing but the primary colors plus black and white. You get all this content for the low. I feel like a used car salesman now. For the low price of $15, which thank God Patreon have converted into local currencies. It works out to like 13 quid.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's £13 to have access to over 350 tutorials and over 3 years worth of work.
There we go. And you've got very much a focus on the Heresy as a style.
Yes, it's a byproduct of kind of my commission work.
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots and lots and lots of people out there doing wonderful things on Patreon, and every single one of you brings something different to to the table. So, it's understandable that sometimes people look and are like, I don't know what to do. But we've seen lots of your models on tables at events, and people inspired by what you're doing. So, we can vouch for that in that there is a definite style, though not everyone has to or does follow that style. There is a definite signature style, shall we say, to Heresy.
Yeah, it's very, and that's something we do talk about a little bit in the Patreon, between fantastical and realistic paint schemes. So the Heresy is very much located in like a historical, military-esque painting style. So you use filters, oils, weathering. For the most part, it's a desaturated palette, so there's a lot of grey mixed in there. However, you can use more fantastical hints and tints. So there are a few tutorials on there with more fantastical elements to it. But yes, like you say, it's a heavy focus on the Horus Heresy because I'm going to sound like a snob here, but in Games Workshop's range, I don't think there's a better model range out there than the Horus Heresy in that scale.
That's fair enough. That's an opinion.
Yep.
I think it's one that you would be hard pressed to argue against. Though some people might put up a good argument for a certain line or two, but that we have a wealth of fantastic models. I say, I've said this in a number of shows recently. That Dark Angels line by itself is phenomenal. Right, not everything that's come out in the Horus Heresies, 100% wonderful. But
No. Certainly, we've had the banana fur gate and the upside down bolters. Certainly.
Even them, I think the quality of the sculpts of the Varagir is slightly below the others, but upside down bolters, I almost don't care about that in terms of, there are a few models that have come out that look a bit like, not phoned in, but not quite meeting the quality.
Name and shame.
I'm trying to think now. This is the problem I've got. There's so many lines out there, but I think it's more when you look at, say, a whole line, say the Dark Angels, and you just think they haven't put a foot wrong. Even if I'm not a massive fan of a style, it's so well done.
Yeah, I think that's the difference between style and objectively being a bad sculpt. So the Terminators, for example, beautiful sculpts, love them. They're, in my personal opinion, they're a little bit too clustered.
Sure, yeah.
However, that's not a criticism of the sculpt. That's not saying it's objectively bad. It's just, in my personal taste, it's a little bit too cluttered, which could be easily remedied with a knife.
Yeah, I think there have been times where people have questioned poses on some models.
So recently I put up a poll about reposing Primarchs. It's something I'd love to produce for the Patreon, something I've been talked about a lot recently. An introduction to sculpting, how to use green stuff, what are the different qualities of using with Milliput, what are the basic tools, etc., etc. So I'd love to resculpt a few of the Primarchs and film them all.
That's cool.
But when I post this up online, I think my original intention of I love these sculpts and I'd like to produce a series just to alter them slightly has been taken as a criticism of the sculpts themselves. Like so-and-so is like Fulgrim keeps turning up again and again as one of those sculpts that needs revamping. I personally don't see it.
No, I'm the same.
It's divine, it's perfection. Anything that I can do to sculpt on top of these will lessen the overall effect.
Yeah, and
it's purely there to see something different and as a, teaching tool to show you how to use the green stuff to get different kinds of effects.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong if you want Dawn trying to strike someone.
Or Gilliman in a more action-packed pose.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that, and that doesn't necessarily undermine the pose itself. You're right. I understand a little bit why Korax gets it as well.
How come? Because I love that sculpt.
Because people people don't think it's weird. It's one of those things where I think when it's in a model form, for some people it doesn't look real. Where actually it's a bit like the Lumineth Realm Lords, the horses for the Lumineth Realm Lords that recently came out. A number of people were like, "Oh my word, these horses are so derpy. Why is his leg sticking out like that?" And you can immediately go to Google image search. Galloping horse, and you can find horses in exactly the same pose.
Yeah.
But because it's in a model and it's static, something in some people's interpretation, their brain goes, "That's not right," because we don't see that as a static image very often. And I think Corax has that as well because of the downward movement, that particularly the hair, like it's all wrong. And it's like, well, I don't think it's wrong, because of the nature of the movement of the model, but because sometimes we're looking at things in a static stationary pose, which actually is an action pose, and sometimes brains do that. And you know what? Some people just don't like the model. Cool.
Yeah.
You know, you're allowed to not like the model.
Oh yeah. Because we disagree with you doesn't mean you're wrong.
No, I mean sometimes it might be, but but yeah, you know, there is. The guys, the people who've sculpted those Primarchs are extremely good at what they do. Whether it's Sam or Rob or who did Perturabo, I can't remember. My mind's gone. It's really annoying now. He's done a couple. Because that was all CAD. Forgive me. That's not sticking in my head. But it's like one of those things, like, I mean, we've mentioned before, you know, people bag on about the Varagir, and I understand why, you know, the guy can't sculpt. Well, he sculpted Alfarius, you know, so yeah, the guy can sculpt. There's more than one person in that step that okays those models. And if you don't like them, cool, change them. I mean, the biggest thing for me for the Varagir is their weapon loadout. I don't think I know if I want to buy them because I don't want those weapons. And do I want to go through the effort of, you know, of chopping those weapons off and maybe reposing them to suit different weapons? But maybe I do. Maybe that's my next step.
Yeah. So during the course of the conversation, Russ came to mind. Right. So when you look at that sculpt, I know a lot of people don't like the trailing leg.
Right.
But if you look at the outline, if you manage to take a picture of it on a white background and black it out, the outline of the miniature, the silhouette, looks like a wolf.
Yeah.
That's running. So that's the intent. I think so we've obviously had the pleasure of speaking to the designers. We have been able to talk to them and kind of like tease out these little design notes that make sense. Guilliman, for example, his pose, it's reminiscent of the Roman emperors who would always point a finger to the sky as if to signal their divinity, their exceptional status within the community. So that's what Guilliman is doing in that pose. Sanguinius, for example, he is very reminiscent of artworks of depictions of angels, especially Michael, the angel Michael, or the angel Gabriel defeating Satan. So these classical cues that are being drawn into the artwork. And I don't think there's any dispute that these are pieces of art. In this scale. I don't think there's a better range of sculpts in this scale in the world. As a collection, they're just completely and utterly divine. They're in a class in and of themselves. So having that opportunity to maybe scratch a little bit deeper, to chat with the designers, and it's something because of 2020, because of COVID, we've been unable to do.
Yeah, I did look up. It was Edgar who sculpted.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was like, no, I have to go and do it. You're absolutely right. There's so much. The quality of the Primarchs is absolutely phenomenal. That's why they take so long, you know. And they're all done old school. Well, no, most of them are done old school because Edgar did play around with new school. But just amazing. And I think there's a lot of people who are scared to paint them, let alone move them around a bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's partly the intention behind the Patreon when it was first conceived, was to produce high quality 4K video tutorials and PDF support on each one of the of them, to give you that introduction, to almost like break the seal of fear behind the miniature. And so I can show you the color choices that I've made, the direction of the brushstroke, the sort of PSI, the thinning levels of the paint. I try and be as comprehensive as I possibly can be during the course of these tutorials to give you as much of a step-by-step. And I guess that's the ethos that went into the Patreon of these videos, was to make, not for me to show off, but to make it a step-by-step process by which you can achieve the best result you're able to.
Sure. Well, at the end of the day, your business doesn't survive if you're just there showing off. It has to be relevant and useful. So that's fair enough. That's cool. We like that. So we got 25 days of content to absorb.
The only problem would be you absorbing it all by the end of it, because there's just so much on there.
But that's the beauty, is you don't have to absorb it all in those 25 days.
No, I just pick and choose what you like the look of, and the tutorials, they have been set up. I'm painting an Abaddon. I'm painting the leather jerkings on him, or the leather straps. That same tutorial can be applied to Space Wolves. It can be applied to a larger bust. It can be applied across a whole plethora of different things. The black armor. So very recently I did an experiment using a TMM, so a true metallic and non-metallic hybrid, on the Lion sword that I want to apply to larger busts, to AOS miniatures, to other manufacturers' miniatures, because I think it has a lot of essentially it's a non-metallic underlayer, underpainting that you then glaze metallic paints on top of.
Okay.
So you have the best of both worlds. You have that definitive marks in the miniature that non-metallic give you, but you also have the reflective shine of a true metallic paint.
Cool. Yeah, I think you're definitely right. I think anyone who doesn't bookmark or save various tips from various different places. I've got certain GW videos I go to for certain things. Like if I know, and other people as well, like certain little bits. So I know if I'm painting purity seals, and I have a certain way I want to do them. I've got it written down anyway, so I generally know it. But it always used to be, right, this video, that purity seal, boom, that's my purity seals done. And then loads of those little bits you can bring in and out. And next time if I'm painting, say leather, so maybe doing that leather, but on the next model I sit there and think, actually I want a different style of leather. Cool, I've got a different video for that one. These resources you've got, then it's just this library of knowledge that you go, I know what I want, and that will do it. Particularly if you're not, I'm not a painter. I paint by numbers and I do as I'm told, kind of thing. And so for me particularly, just literally having the resource to go, I like that, how do I do it? Boom, that's my video. Off you go. It's time saver.
Like you say, not everybody has weeks, hours to dedicate to us.
Not everyone enjoys it.
Such limited time to dedicate to our hobby. We want to get the most from it. So we want to sit down and maybe not read or develop this philosophy of painting. No, to hell with that. You just want a leather recipe to do in half an hour.
Yeah, and I'm not a painter, in that I don't enjoy it like you do. So, so I'm looking for results. I'm results orientated in that respect. But if you are a painter and you enjoy that experimentation, then it still helps to go and look at 2 or 3 or 4 different ways that people paint leather, and to go, I see what each of them are trying to do. Okay, that can inform me in learning my own technique as well. So there's something to be gained from everyone by looking around, and it will be I'll get one video from GW, one video from Myles, one video from someone in Spain, and one from my best mate, who just happened to show me it one night, and you just find what works for you and what you want and what you can learn from.
Yes, 100%. 100%, yeah. Couldn't agree more.
Groovy. Anything else?
No, that was it. I just wanted to come on, hawk my wares, and then disappear for 6 months before I have something else to sell. Then I'll hit you up.
Perfect. So, so you can go to Patreon and search for Lil Legend.
Yep.
I'll put the link
make
in
sure
this.
you sign up on the 1st to get your sticker. And if you come via this route, send me a message via the Patreon app or via the Patreon app isn't the best. Use the web browser version of it. It has a search function. Send me a message via that. All you have to do is say Imperial Truth, and I'll send you the PDF online guide, Introduction to Colour Theory.
Wonderful stuff. I will put out that message before this episode goes live as well, and hopefully people may have seen that about signing up nice and early.
Fantastic. And if I don't say this to you enough times already during the course of the Patreon videos, Merry Christmas, everyone.
Oh, blimey, we're recording this way too early for that
this
statement.
is what, June? Yeah, it's sweltering outside.
Absolutely, yeah. COVID is it's going to be over by August. We'll be fine.
I don't think we'll even be able to wear masks outside. It seems like a bit of a conspiracy for me.
Yeah, absolutely. We should probably move on before that gets misinterpreted as you lose hundreds of subscribers because they think you're one of them. It's all good.
Game of you, who knows? I don't want to play that game of Russian roulette.
No, that's it. Awesome, wonderful stuff. Well, we'll have you back on, I'm sure, and hopefully we'll meet you at an event at some point soon as well.
That'd be lovely. That'd be so nice. Yeah, if you are at an event in the future and this is all over, just hug me. I'm craving human contact.
Definitely. Awesome. Cheers, dude. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of The Imperial Truth. If you want to contact us to feedback on the show, any topics in the show, anything like that, then please feel free, Greg at theimperialtruth.com, or drop us a message on the Facebook page, or send a message, or tweet us, or Instagram, or whatever you want. That would be really cool. The links that I mentioned are in the show notes, so Myles' links and things like that as well. As are the links for the Patreon if you want to support us, the shop if you want to go and buy some gear, all those kind of things. If you want to leave a review on whatever you listen on, that will always be welcome as well. I'm going to keep this outro super short, super sweet, because, frankly, it will be too much of me going on otherwise. Please, post. I want to see pictures of what everyone's doing over the festive period with their hobby. If they do get a chance to hobby, I know some people do, some people don't. It's always a bit of a mix for what people can get up to. I always have plans to do so much stuff and regularly do very little of it, including reading, which is always something I try and do. Because we're going away, there's a chance I can get more of that done this year, though. We will have to see. But the next time the show will come out will be the new year. So, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays and whatever you may or may not be celebrating. And, a Happy New Year as well. I hope it all goes well for you, and we'll see you on the other side. You have been listening to The Imperial Truth.